One.
Well, aloha and welcome back. I hope you can hear me at this point in time. It took a minute to figure
About
out
15 minutes.
how to I don't know, technical problems all around. Don't understand them yet. I'm going to have to consult with a professional. So you're supposed to be able to go back and forth and share your screen, but I haven't been able to do that yet. And so now we're going to show you the PowerPoint so that we can teach about issues commonly associated with trauma. So that is our topic today, and you'll just hear our voices, and we apologize. We'd love to see your face. Sorry you can't see ours. Again, today, this week, yesterday, Monday, actually, 4/20, we launched our 2020 campaign to raise money for Kids Hurt 2 Hawaii's 20th year. So please go to the link provided in our previous post, and donate $20 if you like, or any amount will help our families. So let's talk about some of the things that grieving and traumatized children might be experiencing. You can have grief without trauma, and you can have trauma without grief. But often our families have both. So it can be very difficult for children. So let's move on to talk about, how do you know if you have trauma? Well, here's how you know. Go and take the ACEs test. ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. That's how you know. Is take that test. There are 10 adverse childhood experiences that you can choose from, and 10 common childhood traumatic events. And they're not as severe. The 10 listed there are not nearly as severe as Kids Hurt 2 Hawaii's children experience. So that should tell you something about the level of trauma that they are dealing with. So it's meant to be used as a guideline, the test. It's based on research, and what they found were high ACEs scores resulted in lifelong consequences. So trauma in childhood affects you your whole life. This is important information. And you can take that test by clicking on that link. I'm not sure that you're able to click on that link in the broadcast, but if you are, let me know. If you're not, we'll be sure to copy and paste it into our Facebook page at a later time so that you can take it. We did this test with foster youth, and most of the youth, I'd say 100% of them, had anywhere from 8 to 10 traumatic events. That's a lot. That's a very high score. So what does it mean? Well, 4 or more on the ACEs test means that you have a higher risk for health problems and behavior problems. Some of those behavior problems would be lack of physical activity, smoking, alcoholism, drug use, or missing work a lot. Some of the physical and mental health problems: severe obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs. Why would you have STDs? Well, because a lot of people act out sexually, and that can result in sexually transmitted disease. Heart disease can be a consequence of childhood trauma, even cancer, stroke, COPD, and broken bones. I find it interesting that a high percentage of people with pre-existing conditions are not surviving the COVID-19 illness, which is a horrible, horrible illness. It's just terrible what happens to a person who goes through that illness. But those who have pre-existing conditions, and a lot of people do because of childhood trauma, are not doing well. So this is important for you to know about yourself, because it's going to help you, hopefully, it has me, to manage your health in a more proactive way. The ACEs score of 8 or more equals a 20-year decrease in lifespan. So I figure I better live it up, because I may not live as long as people without childhood trauma. Well, live it up for me is probably eating healthy and being happy.
Do you exercise?
Well, I can work on that. Exercise is probably my weakest area, and definitely need to work on that. And just, be grateful. Every day I wake up and I think about what am I grateful for? And there's so many things. If we live in Hawaii, so we can look out the window and see the beautiful day before us, I'm grateful for that. Gratitude is a huge boost to the immune system. So being grateful is really one of my most effective ways of managing my health and increasing my lifespan.
Laugh a lot.
An ACEs score, laughing, of 7 or more, they found causes of 1,200 higher risk for suicidal ideation. So people who have 7 or more of these experiences in childhood, these adverse childhood experiences, are 1,200 times more likely to think about suicide than lower scores. So this was one of the biggest studies ever done, and the outcomes have been pretty powerful. It's time that we understand that trauma is a health crisis, and we need to act, we need to treat, we need to give people the resources that they need. And fortunately, it's not going to be quarantining them or stay at home orders, which is, we're in a health crisis now. And we're doing everything we can to protect ourselves and our loved ones by staying home and wearing masks. So thank you all for doing that. Let's talk about some of the symptoms of trauma. Now, this is the first symptom of trauma, and this is probably why many people don't get the help they need after being traumatized, because the first symptom is there are no symptoms. You don't feel anything. You seem fine. A child seems fine. Why do they seem fine? Because all of their energy is redirected into coping mechanisms, suppressing feelings, not thinking about it, avoidance, running away, getting into fights. Remember we talked last week about the fight or flight reaction? That's that nerve in our body, the vagus nerve, being overactive because of trauma. And there you have it. Running away and fighting can be one of the first symptoms of trauma, that active vagus nerve. So the numbing, let's talk about numbing and avoidance. What does that look like? Well, first of all, it's important to understand that all of these reactions are defense mechanisms. They are protective. That means that your body trying to survive a physical threat. Your body has perceived that you are in imminent danger of death or harm, and it's trying to survive that. And so doing so, it has to engage some of these mechanisms, and they're protective. The person who's numb feels nothing. That's such a weird state to be in, to feel nothing. And they engage in efforts to avoid thoughts, feelings, activities, places, conversations, and or people. So they're doing a lot of avoidance, and they have a diminished interest in things they were interested in before. this is something to notice. If a child or a person suddenly loses interest in something that was special to them, I want to know what happened. What happened to this person? And why did that interest change? Because a lot of times people don't tell us about the traumatic events that happen to them, especially children. So notice that and then begin to engage them in resources and support. And this mechanism will last as long as a person needs it to last. And believe it or not, if you don't get what you need after trauma, this could last an entire lifetime. Yep, you could stay numb, avoid, be protective, lose interest, all of your life if you don't get your needs met, because this is protective. And so it will last as long as you need it to last. And what is it we need? We talked about last week, in order to shift out of that trauma response, we need safety. Number one, most important thing is safety. One of the symptoms of trauma are re-experiencing, rehear, re-see, re-feel the traumatic event as if it is happening now. Why does this happen? Because information is stored as sensations in the primitive brain. So that vagus nerve, when it becomes hyperactive and shuts down the upper part of the nerve, so that what you're experiencing, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling doesn't come through to your language center. It doesn't make it into other parts of your brain. Instead, that information, that sensory information, goes into your primitive brain and it's stored there as sensation. So when you're triggered, then it's as if that traumatic experience is happening right now. And the behaviors and the reactions are the same as if it were happening right now, because the body thinks it's happening. Because the body is hearing, seeing, feeling as if. So it is a sensation in the body. It's not controlled by the language center or the thought center. So this is important to know. Maybe not all of the information gets into the primitive brain. Some of it might make it into the language center so you can talk about it, but there's some of that information ends up in your primitive brain. So for me, for example, my trigger was a baby crying. Why would you be triggered by that? Well, because I was involved in childhood with in a family where our father was violent. So there was domestic violence. He was abusive, and there were a lot of babies, and so there was a lot of crying, babies crying primarily. And so when I hear a baby crying, I think something bad is happening, and that's how my body reacts. So I've had to work on that. I have to practice calming myself down when that happens, talking through it. I got a lot of help where I used to live because everybody in the neighborhood behind me, beside me, on both sides had babies, and they were criers. So there you go. Get to work on those things sometimes, even when you wish you didn't. All right. Trauma creates triggers. I talked about that trigger. What does it mean when you get triggered? Triggers are something that sets off a memory tape or a flashback, transporting the person back to the event of her or his original trauma. And so they're going to respond as if they need to fight or flight or freeze. So visuals can be traumatizing or triggers. Like, for example, they know that red is a trigger color. Sound can be a trigger. Hearing something. Smelling smoke, perhaps, can trigger a trauma around a fire. So these are touch, how somebody touches you. So we're very careful about whether we, not touching children in our program. We always say children can initiate physical contact. We don't do that because we don't know how they've been touched, and we want to keep them safe and keep them feeling safe so they can work on their trauma and heal. So what happens when somebody gets triggered? Well, they're typically going to try to cope with what's happening in their body with a trauma response. Taste is also a trigger. Familiar tastes of something, those are all things that can trigger a trauma response. Trauma also leads to a foreshortened sense of the future. That means that there's a sense of hopelessness about the future. We will hear young people say, why go on? I won't live long anyway. What does it matter? And because they have this hopelessness about the future, often traumatized people will have difficulty with unpredictability and unreliability. You show up late at a time you're supposed to meet, and the person waiting for you goes ballistic. Why? Because it's triggering their trauma, because they can't cope with unpredictability and unreliability. They need to know what's going to happen. So at Kids Hurt Too, we always make sure that the children have a predictable environment in which to heal in. They know what's going to happen when, and what we're going to do next, and what we're going to do after that. And so we give them this information in advance so that they can predict what will happen next. So all of our groups, our support groups, are the same. They know exactly what we're going to do. And when they come into a group, they know what's going to happen. This predictability and reliability of services gives them a great sense of safety and helps them to calm their nerve. Often, when you have a foreshortened sense of future, you expect that bad things happen. And people often feel uncomfortable when things are going good. I've heard this said a lot. Oh, things are really going great. Yeah, that means the other shoe is about to drop or something bad's going to happen soon. So that's what happens with that. Yeah. With trauma, there can be recurrent recollections. The memory of what happened repeatedly occurs. It's like a thief. It's intrusive. It comes into your thoughts, into your mind without wanting it to. It can happen at any time and anywhere. And that creates some difficulty because you could be in a grocery store. You could be at a party, and then suddenly this intrusive memory comes back, and you got to run, or you got to fight somebody, or you freeze. So again, that can be a difficult struggle for many people. Reenactment is also a symptom of trauma. One will often put themselves in danger.
Oh, sounds like.
So a rape victim might walk down a dark alley. You know what this is really about, and I find this very interesting. Why would a person put themselves in danger? Why would they be with a person who's not safe? And what studies have found, and from the work of Bessel van der Kolk, who is Bessel, B-E-S-S-E-L, van der Kolk, V-A-N-D-E-R-K-O-L-K. I love that name, but it's a little tricky. But he found that a person often loses their ability to differentiate what is safe from what is unsafe because of trauma. So a person who's been traumatized, especially in childhood, may not recognize that their situation or a relationship is in some way unsafe. So we often criticize victims of domestic violence who were victimized in childhood, abused in childhood, and choose a person who's abusive, and we think, why are they doing that? Well, maybe it's because their brains have not been able to develop the capacity to differentiate what is safe from what is unsafe. They can't tell the difference. So of course, this depends on trauma-specific content, what actually happened to the person. Other symptoms are detachment from others. People will say, I don't want to get close because I'll just get hurt. So they stay separate. They detach from others. They have a restricted affect. They hold their feelings back. You never know what's going on with them. They might be hypervigilant, so they're watching everything. I always say you can't hide the cookies from a traumatized child, or any child for that matter, but that's beside the point. Mm-hmm. But it's important to understand that children, adults who have been traumatized are hypervigilant. You cannot grieve if you're vigilant. Trauma is primary. So that's why in this series on Inside Times, I talk about trauma first, because trauma is primary. Once they calm the vagus nerve, then they'll be able to move into that grief process. But when you're vigilant, you cannot work on yourself. You cannot grow. You cannot be spontaneous. You cannot be imaginative. So vigilance just takes away much of our capacity for joy in life. Hypervigilance makes for a good counselor, however, or a good social worker. So a lot of people with trauma will go into counseling or social work. And, you know, when you're able to see very clearly people's feelings because you notice every little nuance, then you make a pretty good counselor. But that's from hypervigilance. So it's a good side. And here's another one, self-hatred. This is so sad. And actually, self-hatred is a mild way of saying it. The books say self-loathing. Yes. That, you know, is so difficult. So it's like they always tell traumatized people, build your self-esteem. You just need to feel good about yourself. And yet they have this symptom of self-hatred that's a consequence of childhood trauma. That's a consequence of trauma. And so it's impossible to have self-esteem if you hate yourself. So I always thought that self-esteem was overrated. I tried it, you know, back in the day when I was young, they did these self-esteem exercises, and I always felt like they made me feel worse instead of better because I had all this self-hatred. And, you know, I didn't really understand till I learned more about trauma in myself that self-esteem is overrated. I mean, think about people in war-torn countries. Do they have the opportunity to have self-esteem? No, not likely. So what we really have to think about is relying on other qualities that are strengths. So for me, it was courage. I had a lot of courage, and that became more important to me than self-esteem. And I got through a lot in my life, and I achieved what I achieved, not because I felt good about myself, but because I had courage and I was willing to take on the challenges that would create a better life for me. So he's talking about my fear of the bathroom. I had, as a child, terrified of the bathroom. I thought for sure the bathroom is where I would die. And yet I went to the bathroom every day, numerous times a day. And I think that helped me build courage.
Me too.
Yeah.
The most
Another outcome of trauma is hyper-reactivity. You become hyper-reactive. You know, normal people have, the normal meaning non-traumatized people, have a reactive level that maybe goes from 0 to 5. Let's say they hear a boom in the background. It goes from 0 to 5. Like, oh, what was that? And then they listen and they figure out, oh, okay, that was just a car backfiring. But a traumatized person hears a boom in the background, and their reactivity level is already set at 5 because they're hyper reactive. So they're already set at 5. And as a result, when they hear that boom, they go 10, 20, off the charts reaction. What the heck was that? What's happening? Is it a bomb? Is it a gun? And even when you tell them that it's just a car backfiring, they cannot calm themselves back down to their normal higher level of reactivity. So what that means is that they take that reactivity level into their regular life. They go home and why are you looking at me like that? Why did you say that? And they start to react to things that maybe other people don't understand. Like, why are you reacting like that? Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? And as a result, we have problems in our relationship. And instead of just saying, it's okay, just stay calm, you're okay, you're safe. I get that a lot, which I really appreciate. So with hyperreactivity, a person has difficulty with affect regulation, in effect, controlling their emotions and their reactions to things. They can't calm themselves down without support. Remember, we are co-participants in our reality. So calming ourselves down isn't just up to us. It's up to everybody around us. So when we're upset, it's important for other people to be even more calm, to help us to calm as well. But that doesn't often happen. Often people get very reactive as well, and they start yelling, and then there's a lot of difficulty in anybody getting calm. So it's important to know this, because you might find yourself present with somebody who needs calming, and you might react to that suddenly with your own hyperreactivity. But think about this and think, okay, now's a good time for me to be calm. Take those deep breaths and slow exhales, and then you can help that other person to calm themselves down. Now, the difficult part about hyperreactivity and this difficulty with affect regulation is that it fluctuates between emotional flooding. So their emotions are off the chart, totally upset, having a rage attack, traumatic rage, and then they go numb. Oh, well, it doesn't matter anyway. Nobody cares, or something like that. And then you're like, what happened? It's kind of like they're going from really intense emotions to feeling nothing. And you're kind of don't know what's going on because you're not shifting that quickly. You're not in a trauma response. So if you see this happening in somebody, keep in mind it's probably a result of their trauma, traumatic rage. The switches tend to be drastic in intensity and frequent in nature. And of course, this contributes to conflict in relationships. It makes it hard to get along with other people if we don't understand where they're coming from, why they're having such strong reactions. It's not about the here and now, it's about their bodies. What's in their bodies. It's not really what's happening now, but what's happening inside their bodies. And their bodies are experiencing life or something in the moment as if it's that trauma. Their bodies are experiencing the fight or flight or freeze response. And so calming that nerve down, and this is the good news, is we can do a lot to help ourselves and calm ourselves. Physical symptoms can be distress, somatic complaints. I was like that. I was often called a hypochondriac because I complained a lot about this body hurts and that body hurts. And kids hurt too. Kids have what they call invisible owies. Somebody touches them lightly and it's like, ow, ow, that hurt. But nothing happened. And we don't respond by saying, you're okay, quit complaining. That's how most people respond. We respond by saying, oh, it's hurting. Something's hurting you. And let's get some ice. We put ice on a lot of things, and ice fixes a lot of things. So keep that in mind. or Band-Aids, even when there's nothing bleeding or no visible injury. We go through a lot of Band-Aids. So nurture around those physical complaints, which will allow them to calm down and ease their suffering. Traumatized people often have sleep disturbance. They have anxiety. They get ill more often. We talked about that earlier. May have eating disorders. And the memory of their event is stored as sensation, which I talked about earlier as well. Some psychological symptoms include inability to recall. They may not remember what happened, but their body remembers. I read a book once. A woman was talking about a child who had been abused in infancy. And by the time she was 3, she started having physical symptoms that they could not find any medical reason for until they found pictures that had been taken of her as an infant and the abuser abusing her. And the abuse was happening in exactly the same place she was having physical symptoms. So people often say children don't remember or infants don't remember, but their body remembers. So keep that in mind. Irritability is often also a symptom of depression in childhood. So children don't present as sad, they present as irritable and cranky and angry. A traumatized person may have impaired concentration because you can't concentrate, you can't learn if your lower nerve is overactive and your upper nerve is inactive. So they have difficulty with concentration and learning. Emotional aspects, brain damage, and we know that trauma does cause brain damage. It causes the primitive brain to grow larger, and the parts of the brain that learn and do imagination and creativity and connections with others doesn't grow as well. The greater the trauma, the greater the damage to the brain. Even small difficulties in infancy can cause brain damage, studies have found. So we've got to help people with developing their brains more, which can be done. We talked about that last week. If you remember that play heals the brain, I'll talk about that again because that's to me, that's exciting. So changes in learning, we talked about that. Social isolation, impaired judgment, and self-hatred. These are psychological symptoms. So let's review what we've talked about so far. All right, I like to review because I often miss things. For example, a person who has trauma may have problems processing auditory information. So they begin to rely on visual information. And you might be talking to them saying something very simple like, come and sit down, but they're hearing wah, 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 or they're not hearing anything, but they see your lips moving, because when that upper nerve is shut down or inactive, it's one of the parts of the nerves that control our hearing. And there's also a place in our brain that controls comprehension of auditory information. If these areas are in any way damaged, then a child is going to have trouble with auditory information, or an adult perhaps, right, Jerome?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what does that mean? That means that you need to show what you want, not tell them. So when we teach an activity, we always give a visual. So show it a sample of how it's done. Do it with them. If we talk about the guidelines for safety, we have a picture of each guideline that kind of shows what the guideline is in action. And so we show and not tell, because these people will become visual learners. They will rely on visual information. And guess what? They're not going to do very well in schools, because schools rely on auditory information, talking, listening. So yeah, that's And then one of the symptoms was the person seems fine because energy is redirected into coping mechanisms. There's a sense of futurelessness and trauma-specific fears. Oh, we have a sound effect. Impulsive. They become impulsive. Their memory is sensory-based. It needs a story. So this energy builds up and they might be more impulsive because they're because their energy is building up. I'll talk a little bit about energy at the end here, but their memories are sensory based. They start to have feelings, thoughts, sensations, visualizations, sounds that are from their trauma, but it feels like it's here and now because it's in the body. So they have a tendency to become very impulsive. People don't know, why are you acting that way? Why are you doing that? Because they don't know what's going on inside their body. Only you know what's going on inside your body. More sound effects. The energy is chaotic. And I'll talk a lot about energy when we get into our segment on grief. I'll talk more about energy, but we all have an energy. There's a sense of a person's energy, and traumatized children tend to be very active, have a lot of energy, and their energy tends to be very chaotic. The energy around a traumatized adult tends to be very chaotic. So you kind of have this sense of things being out of control, but they're not necessarily out of control. That's the energy of trauma. Heroes Ford is pulling out his toys. And I talked about being hyper-reactive and hyper-vigilant. There are changes between numbness and emotional flooding that can seem extreme and out of context. Flashbacks, self-hatred. So these are just symptoms. Everybody's an individual. You're not necessarily going to have all of these. Some of them last longer than others. But these are things that can be changed, that you can have an impact on. You can heal in your own body. They're just symptoms. Again, remember, everybody's different. So learn about the individual, learn about your own response and what's in your body, and go from there. Don't think, you may have them all, or you may have had them all at different times, or you may just have one, or you may not have any of them because you're an individual. So everybody's an individual. So let's talk about utilizing solutions to healing trauma. There are solutions: athletics, keeping physically active, having a pet. I probably petted the hair off my dog because these last few days or weeks, I should say, of being inside and all of the fears around the COVID-19 has kept me anxious, and I just have really been giving my dog a lot of attention. She loves it, and it helps me. Imagination, using your imagination. Children do this naturally. They know how to heal themselves, and they will do it if we give them the space and the safety that they need to do it. Having each other, having somebody to connect to, and of course, social distancing is not going to be supportive of healing trauma. We're going to have to get creative in how we work on that. Think about creative ways of staying social and connected. Get online. Nature is a great healer. Go out into nature. Nature's always available to us. Maybe our friends aren't always there. Our pets aren't always there. We don't always feel imaginative. We're not physically active, but nature is always there, and it can be a great healer and calming force. Sand play is also very useful in healing trauma, that primarily with children, but as you can see, adults can do it too. I did adult play therapy years and years ago, and it really went well. And these were all for domestic violence survivors. So sometimes we need some guidance as adults to play too. And sand play is a good way that we can make that happen. Playtime. Play is one of the most effective ways for people of all ages to heal trauma. Traumatized children may lose the ability to play spontaneously. So we have to help them. And how do we do that? We provide them with a safe environment, a place that they can feel supported, unconditionally accepted, and know that nobody is going to hurt them. Nobody's going to yell at them. Nobody's going to complain about them, that they can do what they need to do to heal their bodies. Play is that great healer. It's nature's greatest tool for creating new neural networks and for reconciling cognitive difficulties. It helps our brain to heal and grow, to develop new connections, to get bigger. So while we may have had some damage from childhood, we can still grow our brains in adulthood. As a matter of fact, here's an interesting fact. Adolescent brain development is more rapid than in infancy. So knowing that, we can do more to help our young adults to heal, knowing that their brains are growing at a faster rate than in infancy. And that means they have this opportunity. And that's why they love to play and go out with their friends and connect and
Safe play.
yeah, as long as it's safe. In other words, it heals the brain by growing connections between the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. Remember, we talked about the upstairs and the downstairs brain last time. So if you missed it, it's saved on the Kids Hurt Too Hawaii website, and you can refer to it at a later time. There are protective factors that help us. These are strengths we can develop and enhance for ourselves. Let's talk about some of those protective factors. Healthy behaviors and coping skills. Doing things that are good for us. Coping in ways that are healthy. Positive things in your life. What is positive in your life? Focus on that. Think about the things that you're grateful for. It lowers the risk. Positive factors lower the risk for self-harm and other destructive behaviors. Understand that feeling hopeless does not mean it is hopeless. Recognize when you need help because symptoms can lead to worse conditions. You are not alone. Help is there. All you need to do is ask. Let's talk about some of those protective factors. Accountability and independent living skills. So being able to fend for yourself, so to speak, and being responsible. Family relationships can be protective. Connections with your community. Cultural awareness and appreciation. Positive self-image and self-esteem. Oh, there's that word again. How about courage? Educational competence. The more you know, the more power you have. Knowledge is power. Vocational competence, having a skill, something you're good at. And going online on Facebook is not one of mine yet, but I'm getting there.
That's time.
Pro-social behaviors, that means how you get along with other people, and social competency. That means getting along with other people. Good health and physical competencies. These are recommended by the Office of Youth Services and are research-based as well. So family support, family, community, and support of youth programs. So by you getting out and helping youth programs like Kids Hurt Too Hawaii, that can make you feel good too, and that could be a protective factor. So if you haven't had a chance to see our 2020 campaign to raise funds for our 20th year anniversary, yay! Then please check that out. Go to paypal.me/Kids Hurt Too Hawaii and make a donation. Then maybe you'll feel good about yourself, or maybe you'll just be having to rely on courage again. Evelina, hi. Okay, there are other things that kind of keep us from getting better too, and these are called risk factors. Risk factors are things that we can work on together to change. So risk factors are unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy coping skills, negative things in a person's life. Risk factors increase our risk for self-harm and self-destructive behaviors. When we are in a dark place and feel alone, we try and hide. However, with a helping hand, we can stand strong. Even if you don't know it, there is at least one person looking out for you. And sometimes when you're in a dark place, it's hard to know. So reach out to someone. Keep a list. Sometimes people are in such a difficult place that I recommend they keep a list of who they can call to talk to, who they can call for a resource, and put that on the refrigerator, because when you're in that dark place, it becomes even more difficult to figure out who to call. So if you got your list up there, you can look at it and then you know. 2 wrongs never make a right. However, one small change can. So don't expect that you have to do it all in one day. Take baby steps. Little bit by little bit, you can heal your body. Here's some risk factors. Arrests, alienation, pregnancy. Yeah, that's a risk factor. Delinquency, gang activity, disproportionate minority contact, substance abuse, and substance use and abuse, and anger and violence. Those are some of the risk factors. So those are the things you might want to avoid as much as possible. Self-care when you're stressed. It's important to know, especially now, how to take care of yourself. This is a stressful time. We are having our inside times where we're asked to stay home, work from home. These are not your inside times. They are our inside times, because we are inside together, apart together. So know that these are stressful times, and self-care is important when you're stressed. Seek help. Connect with someone. That could just mean giving a phone call, calling up a friend, calling up a family member, texting somebody, Facebooking somebody. Connect any way you can. Connect at home. A lot of times we're at home with people we don't connect with. So find ways to sit down and actually connect. We talked to one family and they do board games. Good old-fashioned way of connecting. Just do a board game. Just find a way to connect. Be kind to yourself. Don't expect that you're going to know how to make everything better overnight. These things take time, just like flattening that curve and making sure that this epidemic we're safe from it, that we're all safe. It's going to take some time. We have to be kind to ourselves and give ourselves the time we need to be safe. Make time for yourself. I saw a meme the other day that said, somebody's an introvert when they need time alone during quarantine. And I thought, well, that's me. So I love being quarantined. I love being home. I love having time with Hero 24/7. The more time I have with him, the happier I am. And I also need some alone time. Fortunately, he likes to surf, so that gives me some alone time.
Yeah, not so much.
But can't surf so much now. But I get enough alone time. I do need it. I need to take that time for myself. And you may need that too. Engage in fun and positive activities. Might have to be creative with this. Again, use your imagination. Exercise, relax, and meditate.
Mm-hmm.
So you see somebody doing yoga, you see healthy foods, get plenty of rest, have faith, hope, and the greatest of these is love. Drink water and eat healthy. Believe it or not, when you're stressed out, you get dehydrated. Grief is dehydrating because it's very stressful. Traumatized people may not drink enough water because they forget about their bodies. So you really have to focus on drinking enough water and eating healthy. And that's been my go-to for coping with the fact that I have health problems or potential for health problems or potential for shorter lifespan because of my childhood trauma. So I have really been obsessed over my life, my adult life, with health food and healthy diets and eating healthy. Why are you laughing?
You gotta eat.
Because he thinks I don't eat enough. But I do. I eat the right things, not a lot of things. So create a message of hope. Hero's message of hope for us at Kids for Two Hawaii is one more day closer to a safe and normal life. So every day that you get up is one more day closer to a safe and COVID-19 free life. Thank you for being here today and listening to this message. And in conclusion, I want to invite you to think about creating a self-care kit for yourself.
Mm.
Do you have a toothpick? Pick out the good qualities in yourself and others.
You gotta change every month, then.
Well, toothpicks you want to change every time you use them.
Oh, the toothpick.
Toothpick, Carol.
Yeah, every time.
But that's to remind you to pick out the good qualities in yourself and others. You have a Band-Aid, heal yourself first in order to heal someone else. Chewing gum, stick with it and you can accomplish anything. Pencil, list your blessings and goals every day. An eraser, everyone makes mistakes and it's okay. A tea bag, relax daily and go over the list of your blessings. A tissue, dry someone's tears or perhaps your own so you can see the tears of others. A rubber band, be flexible. Things might not always go the way you want, so you have to be flexible. And a lifesaver candy, think of someone as your lifesaver. And whenever you need to talk, feel free to contact that person and be someone's lifesaver. A golden thread. Friendship is a golden thread that ties together the hearts of everyone. To the world, you may just be somebody, but to somebody, you may be the world. Thank you for joining Inside Times today. I'll keep working on my technical skills and maybe next week you'll be able to actually even see me at the same time you're hearing me. We'll see how that goes. In the meantime, stay safe, wear your mask, be kind to one another, and during these inside times, remember, we're here for you. I want to say what our topic is going to be for next week. This has been this first 3 sessions of Inside Times. We've been talking a lot about anxiety, fear, and trauma. And do we have any questions, Hero? No, just a comment. Somebody's making a nice comment.
No.
Oh, thank you.
Just everybody says watching.
Thank you for watching,
Cheryl's
everybody.
watching.
Yeah.
James watching.
It's nice to know that you're all out there. So next week, we're going to turn our attention to understanding grief and what that means for children, what it might mean for you. So in the meantime, be safe.
Aloha.